Down, Democrats now facing pressure from the largest federal workers union to put an end to the weeks-long stalemate in Washington. Joining us now is the Republican Congressman French Hill of Arkansas. Congressman, welcome back to the program, sir. We've had a couple of guests talk up maybe this ending at the end of November. What are your constituents saying to you, sir?
Well, John, it's nice to be with you. Well, this Schumer shutdown has been a disaster while they try to get $1.5 trillion in new spending, undo all the reforms to the Medicaid program, just to name two items. We're putting farmers at risk in my state. I met with farmers last week. They're desperate for the Congress to come back into session, work with Secretary Brooke Rollins on a particular effort to have a stopgap measure to help them between now and the benefits in the great big beautiful bill in the next fiscal year to help our farm economy, which is in desperate shape. We have record Chapter 12 bankruptcies in Arkansas. I've got 400 National Guardsmen that are on furloughed and on unemployment this week in my district. So my best advice is that if Schumer would release these Democratic senators, let's get the government back open and continue our negotiations on appropriations.
Congressman, do you think that Republicans should all be back on the Hill to potentially await maybe a single funding measure to either pay those individuals like you're talking about in your district that are not getting paid, or federal workers?
Well, the Senate has put those bills on the floor with the senators right there, and Chuck Schumer has blocked the motion to proceed to pay federal workers, to take other targeted actions to pay military employees. I mean, this is the kind of shameful rhetoric and approach that Chuck Schumer has taken. He's holding federal employees and state employees that are funded by federal grant programs hostage, and that's why the employee union of the federal government spoke out yesterday. But that's what I hear from folks in my district every day. The House is at call. We did our work 5 weeks ago. We're on call. We can be back here in minutes if the Senate moves to open the government. And as this drags on, we're just going to be confronted with another vote on the continuing resolution in just a few days. So we've missed all this time of important work on agriculture, on banking, on reviewing housing policy, all because Schumer wants to spend $1.5 trillion more and do away with all the reforms that we made in the Medicaid program.
I guess my question is Speaker Johnson and you and your colleagues willing to vote for some of these one-off spending bills if the Senate was able to pass it?
Well, look, the Senate, what needs to happen is Chuck Schumer needs to reopen the government. That's what needs to happen, Anne-Marie. That's the easiest thing to do. 5 weeks ago, we offered a clean CR that had Democratic support. You have Democratic senators saying that Chuck Schumer is wrong. You have Democratic House members saying that Chuck Schumer is wrong. So he just needs to get with reality and recognize that we should be opening the government, and then we can continue the work on FY26 spending.
You mentioned agricultural and some of the farmers that are suffering right now. A lot of that has to do with the fact that in retaliation to the Trump administration's tariffs, China is no longer buying soybeans. Well, that we're expected to change today or this week. How is your district reacting to what is going on in terms of trade relationships this administration is having with China?
Well, the principal challenge to our row crop farmers in Arkansas is that we're potentially entering the fourth year of bad finances. $1.5 billion in losses is forecast for this farm year. That's the 3 years, and we're getting ready to enter a fourth year, brought about by higher costs due to the inflation during the Biden administration and the inflationary effects of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. These have crushed the cost side of producing a crop, and then prices have stayed fairly reasonable all during this period, but we've had surplus crops around the world. You're right that Joe Biden did not enforce Trump's agricultural products deal in his term, and that only about 60% of the soybeans that China promised to pay and Trump won those purchases were made. So I hope that President Trump can get that market back open for American growers. But we also have to recognize that 4 bad years in a row is going to put the banks in trouble and the farmers in trouble. Before I was in Congress, I was an agricultural lender. I know about how challenging it is with 2 back-to-back losses, but you do a third or start a fourth, you're going to put a lot of farmers out of business.
Congressman, this is a slightly uncomfortable question. I understand that because of what this business means to the people of your state. But at the moment, the U.S. is making, I think, a well-articulated decision to de-risk from China. That would therefore in some ways make it difficult to rely on China being a buyer of anything for the foreseeable future. Do you think that's something we have to reconcile with farm production in this country, that we can no longer rely on the Chinese buyer even if we get some temporary relief and a soybeans deal this week?
Well, I think that's why you see Secretary Bessent and Secretary Lutnick emphasizing soybean markets all around the world besides China. We don't want to ever in business put all your eggs in one basket, and we've been very dependent on the Chinese market, as you know, for the past 3 decades. But we have to recognize we've got to open up other markets around the world. We produced the best soybeans in the world at the best price, and we have the best farmers, and so we just need to make sure that we diversify that market. Because you're right, our farmers at risk as long as we're in the middle of a de-risking strategy from China. But that's not just in ag products, but across the board, obviously.
It's true. You're right in the middle of it right now. Congressman, appreciate your time. As always, the Arkansas